and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. It's grand. We never emphasise the grandness. It's a weekly exercise in holding in wheeze for 2 hours.
Is it? I think it's a podcast in which we battle the normalisation of our own ignorance and share our findings.
Woo! And hopefully open fresh doors. For investigation.
Yes, always, every week.
My name's Michael Forrest.
Oh, and my name's Ivanka Magic.
What are we talking about this week?
This week we're talking about immigration.
Fuck me. I'm a bit scared to talk about in case I have ignorant opinions on.
Are you?
I don't want to just kind of do the normal kind of liberal everything's beautiful. I want to have some opinions, but I also think everything that these Tories and Trump stand for is evil.
I think there's some pros and cons, or some effects of migration and causes, and there are things to discuss that are not all peachy.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk a bit about the sort of multiple standards we seem to have when we talk about immigration. All right, shall we get started? Let the music swell.
Yes.
Let the music swell. How was your week, Ivanka?
I think it was good. It was better than last week. My shoulder seems to be much better. Post my visit to chiropractor and being very diligently doing all my exercises.
Oh, that's good. You should use my app for that.
Your habit app.
Yeah.
I just
daily. It's not good for 3 times a day things, unfortunately.
Is it not?
No.
Well, what I've done is I've tied one of those stretchy exercise bands to the banister downstairs. So every time I go downstairs, I stand doing my exercises. Yeah.
So you're better. Yeah, I've seen a little bit more activity on the
computer.
Publications.
Yes.
We've got to get our merch sorted because I've just realised every week I'm drinking from these mugs that are in the studio cupboard, and I need to get some of our face mugs in that studio cupboard.
Why do you want our faces on mugs?
I don't know. Or our logo then. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think I'd like a mug. So yes, we'll do that next week.
Yeah. And next week, okay, ASAP.
I also
CMYK.
Yeah. I also seem to have something that is either a cold, not a horrible cold, but a cold, or for the first time in my life, some sort of a hay fever type thing. I'm not sure. But everyone in my household has it, so I'm suspecting it's some sort of little summer cold type thing.
Ouch.
I've had a good week. I have had a good week. I've been in good spirits. I've been optimistic. I have been meeting people. I've also been... I've been regularly reminded of the American immigration policy, which is what made me say, come on, let's do immigration, because I have not been able to escape it. And it's pretty grim out there. So that's been happening. And I've been watching World Cup football. Croatia beat Argentina 3-0 last night, which was a lot of fun for anyone who supports Croatia. For those of you who support Argentina, I'm sorry. But I'm not really.
Are you? No, you're not.
Not really. It was a lot of fun.
I checked I got Siri to check the football scores, and that was enough for me.
Siri's not that good at football scores.
No, well, it sort of gave me some little possession shots. I was saying them to Sharon. She's like, well, what are you on about? I was like, well, they had 4 shots on target. You don't know what you're talking about. I do a little bit. I've seen some football, but I also do not really care.
Apparently the happiness that a football supporter experiences when their team wins, whilst is very happy, does not have the long-term impact of the sadness of the team losing. I read recently in some recent study.
Well, did you hear that thing about how domestic violence rises by 34% if a football team loses? I saw. Is that right?
Well, the statistics, because we can't speak for the whole world, is that in Britain, domestic violence goes up when England loses at the football, which is pretty grim also. In fact, my word of the week is pretty grim. There's a few things going on that are pretty grim. I think. Oh, and tomorrow I'm going marching tomorrow. Marching in London town I am. And I'm
with my balloon face.
With your balloon face, and I'm squeezing it in. So basically, there's a pre-arranged that I forgot about camping trip. So I am waving my family off to the campsite. I'm going to go up to London, march for a couple of hours, and then go camping. Get a train to Hayling Island. That's exciting.
Hayling Island, wow. Yeah, I can't make that because I'm going to a festival to film my friend's mechanical modular machine musical thing. So I'm like a professional filmmaker now. I'm getting paid for this.
Wow.
Check me out.
That is impressive. And that is cool. And how's your week though?
My week has been, it's been a very tough week for work. I decided I wanted to make little videos showing how all this complicated blockchain signing app worked, which just really is a good way of having to make sure that everything
works.
Like the user journeys all like flow and there's no like weirdness. And on this particular project, that was an intense little challenge. So, but it's been nice to be working out of my studio because, I need my good mic. This mic, in fact, I was using. But yeah, it's just, I would recommend this to any technical people if you just want to kind of sanity check your UX, try making some videos showing how to perform tasks in your app, and you'll soon discover if something takes a weird number of extra steps and you can resolve them before filming it.
So is that what you were doing? You were fixing things and filming them?
Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly, yeah. It was tough. I've been also thinking about this. We had like a marketing meeting and someone was saying about how people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, which maybe you're very familiar with, but it's something that I'm trying to internalise at the moment.
They buy why you do it.
Yeah, this is something which I thought was an interesting angle.
Yeah.
And because sometimes it's like, you're not really going to be sold on, I make music just because I kind of have to. It sort of has to be because I really need to express the things that happened to me so that other people can understand because, so that sort of thinking. Or, why are you making this up? Oh, just to make a few quid. Or is it because I really want to change the world? Yeah.
But sometimes to make a few quid is a perfectly valid motivation. You go, fair dues.
Some people, yeah, exactly. Some people respect that. And that's fine. I checked my YouTube stats this week because I was thinking about male-female balance in my YouTube after we had a conversation about some wording on something, and I was like, "Am I just being male on this?" And then you had been typing, I think maybe you're being male or something on this. I was like, "Oh God, am I only appealing to male?" And then I checked my YouTube stats for the month, and it said 100% male viewers aged 25 to 34. That's 3,214 views. I thought that can't be right. It's usually, but at best it's like 7% female. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm appealing to me, slightly younger than me. Oh well, that's fine. And yeah, my only final little frivolous point was, what do you say when you hold open a door? Because I'm not charismatic in that situation. I hold the door open. But then what do you say?
There you go. After you? Or is it just a hold?
After you? Well, you can either do that, like be after you, lady. Or you're like, or they're like, thank you. And you're like...
What you have to do is go, you're welcome.
You are welcome.
My mum does that. If you let people pass you in the street and they don't say anything, my mother always goes, "You are most welcome," in a true passive aggressive English style. But just smile. You don't have to say anything, do you? You're opening the door.
I suppose you could smile. That's an idea.
Just kind of
Doesn't
go
come naturally.
or nod, make eye contact. Just kind of do eye contact, bit of a nod.
Eye contact nod.
I'm holding the door
right,
for you. Good. Do you want it?
I held it for a bit longer because you were over there. But I saw you had some stuff. Anyway,
the awkwardness is that sort of like when you're trying to walk away and they don't take the door, I find. So I've held it open, expecting you to come through after me and then take the weight of the door so that I can proceed. I mean, if you're holding the door for somebody in England, they'll probably walk through your door, even if that's not the door they wanted to go through, just because they didn't want the awkwardness of going, oh, I'm not actually going that way.
That is racist.
Is that racist?
Anyway.
Yes.
So
we don't.
Oh God, I feel like maybe we were like putting off the conversation on immigration to some extent.
Are you that worried about your?
No, it's fine. It's fine. But I mean, shall we start with your thoughts, Ivanka?
Wow. Well, the reason I want to talk about immigration. There's a couple of topics off the top of my head. One is obviously the recent American zero tolerance policy on immigration, as far as I can tell, because it's refugees and illegal migrants. So it's migration. There's that's in the news. There's the Hungarians have this week, I think, passed a law to say that lawyers can't give legal advice to illegal migrants.
Holy crap.
There is the fact that we in the United Kingdom have a hostile immigration policy currently. A hostile immigration environment at the moment.
Environment's a nicer word than policy.
Yeah, because it's not the okay. Law. It's not our policy. It's just, we're just a bit hostile in our environment. I don't know what that means. Does that mean they don't give people, enough blankets in their detention centres? I don't know. And then the comment on that got me. Somebody sent me a link to Caroline Lucas reporting from Yarlswood Detention Centre, because we have a policy of indefinite detention of illegal migrants. I think that's the proper term. So, on the subject that you and I have often talked about, the fact that it's uncertainty that makes life really stressful. Yeah. So, that's quite a hostile thing, I think. I
do feel like the term migrants is just a way to try and soften the fact that you're saying immigrants a lot, because immigrants talking about immigrants has sort of got a bad PR now. Right. So they've changed it to migrants so that they can say the same thing. I don't know. Wrong?
I was kind of deliberately saying it because implying that because people immigrate and emigrate, it's people move. Mm. People, because, that's all they are. They're people who move around. Some of them move because they must in order to save their lives. Some of them because they haven't got enough food. Some of them just because they fancy a job in Berlin. Some of them because they've got family in different places. We all move around a lot, and we are all migrants, or many of us move around, and many of us are migrants. And then and there's lots of positive. Traveling. You're not. I think the definition, the difference between a traveller and a migrant is somebody who's going to somewhere to be there for a bit, or work there, or somehow live there. I don't know, if that's the definition.
Malcolm Gladwell's podcast this week was about immigration from sort of across the Mexican border, and it was about how people used to be hardly anything there, and you'd get a lot more circular migration. So people would come to sort of earn a bit of money for 6 months and then go back home to their families for the rest of the year. But then they tightened up the border controls, and then it made it a lot of a bigger deal to cross the border. So you didn't sort of get the people going back. And also they were never really measuring how many people are leaving the country, just how many people are coming in. So they never really had good numbers on what was going on. So, it's...
I think having numbers on leaving countries is actually a thing in general. I think Britain's similar. We don't count because you don't really get your passport checked on the way out very often, do you? So we don't have stats.
You have to show it to. Yeah, you only have to show it to the person.
I think plane travel certainly, but
to
go on a car, nobody's really. The French might register that you've entered France, but British are like, bye.
I am thinking of plane travel, which obviously is a bit...
And that's more to do with identity checking, making sure you're not on their list of naughties.
I always wonder what's going on in that little booth, though. They just sort of look at it, and sometimes they scan it, and I want to know what data's going where for that. And
Well, there was that thing. The Sun did this article, this expose of their journalist who had travelled all the way across Europe without having to show his passport once. And then the Croats promptly produced a scan of his passport at their border. Because there's that sort of Schengen zone. So Croatia's part of the European Union, and it's now one of the borders that faces outside the European Union is its border with... Well, actually, there's a border with Serbia, a border with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro's not in the EU now.
I've been calling it Shenzhen zone for ages.
I think it's Schengen.
It is Schengen.
Shenzhen is in
now.
China, isn't it?
Yeah, I know and I like Shenzhen in China. So I thought it was a coincidence that I was saying. I didn't realise it was Schengen, so I've been saying the wrong thing. I even put it in a bloody song.
Look. We battle the normalisation of our own ignorance on this podcast.
Indeed.
Here to educate ourselves. But yeah, because they've got to do a load of work, so you always have to produce your passport entering Croatia because they're shoring up the Schengen zone basically, and until they tick all the boxes, you still have to get your passport checked in Slovenia, which is the next border along. So it's all a bit. So they do loads of scanning. And when they got those scanners, it was a total nightmare because they were really slow.
Yeah.
And because our house in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the family is so close to Croatia, and you go to Seaside every day, it's like, you saw me yesterday, I'm still just going to Seaside. It's like, but anyway, yeah. So people move around. So there's that sort of immigration, migration, but also things like... One of the stories I heard this week is a friend of mine works for an American company in the UK, and because we were discussing the reversal of the policy or the ending of the policy of taking children away from their parents. But anyway, it's a big American company, international, and they were already talking about how they could apply pressure on the government because 40% of their New York office wasn't born in the United States of America. So it's like, it's kind of hypocritical of many of these big firms to stay silent when they rely on migration massively to run their businesses.
I guess, you've done your fair share of migration, right?
Yeah.
My family's are quite migrant. I have relatives in the US, in Canada, in France. My father grew up in Germany. Well, went to school in Germany, and my worked there for a while. And we've always been quite an international family. My sister sort of lived in Canada, lived in Australia. But it's different, isn't it? Because we're white and middle class, So even though my sister, even though they might go out there, no one's really complaining in the same way. Also, English speaking, hey, I love your accent, all that kind of thing. I think when people talk about immigration, they're not talking about white people, and they're not talking about, they're not talking about my family when they talk about immigration, but it's the same.
Yeah, they're starting to talk about my family because we're Slavs. So it sounds like but my English family is very English. They're like... Yeah. So my mum's the first one that married a foreigner. And messed with the gene pool. Whoa. But I've got Croats up everywhere. There's literally nowhere I can go where there's not some family... if it's not my dad's cousin, it's my dad's second cousin or somebody. Australia, Canada, everywhere. But no, I definitely get the sense that we're not talking about white English-speaking middle class, but even working class. It's not really class. It's just white and English-speaking. I think that gives you a free pass. Did you see the thing that Dave Carter shared on Facebook, which was the State Department doing travelling to America with children, but it was meant for holidaymakers? It's clearly we don't mean those people. We mean those of you coming on holiday. And then you've got all these Dutch and German people going, if I'm bringing my child to the US, should I, tattoo my phone number on their arm so that they can... It was literally it was like the most insensitive timing of some sort of like, hey, come and visit America with your children.
Unbelievable.
It's like, and then one thing that I found quite fascinating about the whole thing is the amount of people on my Twitter timeline arguing with each other about, and it's happening everywhere, whose policy is it? You know, is it an Obama policy that Trump is, you know, implementing? Is it a blah, blah? It's like, I don't care whose policy it is.
Just change
Just
it.
stop it.
Sort it
you
out.
know?
Yeah.
You know, I don't, it doesn't matter. It's America's policy. Own it, please.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that reminds me of that other thing that I think I mentioned of, like, if you want to create terrorists, which is this thing that apparently you're super scared of, see how many more terrorists that prevents. You know,
Yeah. I mean, it's just...
See what happens. See how much you can make people hate you by ripping them from their parents as a child.
Well,
and then be surprised when they start blowing things up because that's the only power they have.
Well, it's like, Lydia Foster, she went to a conference this week, and in her words, I thought it was going to be rubbish, but actually it was really good. High praise. But more and more that we are understanding the science of what happens to a child's brain when it is traumatised. Well, what happens to anyone's brain when there's trauma, but a child whose brain hasn't developed and connections haven't been formed yet, if you traumatise that child, that trauma has to be addressed in order for the brain to heal. Otherwise, it won't, and they will not have the connections necessary to live a quote-unquote normal life. You know, it's like...
They're going to be angry. Like, judging by the anger I had all my life.
Well, yeah.
And, you know, I still had a relatively stable family. Like, I had a lot of that to work through. I mean, I was never like, well, I didn't know who to blame, but like, they've got someone to blame.
Yeah.
Like, rightly so, you know?
And you know, even if you're going to look at this at a purely bean-counting capitalist level, it's expensive to house a child who then turns into a traumatized human, who then turns into a traumatized adult, who then that costs money. They will be then the people who end up in prison on drugs, because that's all they can do. You know, like, it's going to cost you money, so you're better off letting them not be traumatized.
I do think that is something humane or morally right is actually often a good indicator of whether capitalism-wise it's probably going to work long-term. Maybe that's really naive. like you can only get away with exploiting and like betraying people for so long before it comes back to you.
Yeah, I'd like to think that's true. Not sure.
That's how I try and live, but I mean, maybe I'm just horribly naive.
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think of that. There's that whole thinking amongst a certain. I don't know if they're a type of economist or a type of capitalist or a type of finance person or whatever, but they think that the market will right itself. So what's right will float to the top and make more money because it was what works, or the proper answer. I think there's a whole different school of thinking that says that's bollocks. Because I'm kind of inclined to think. But you'd think that if something is totally wrong and unworkable, at some point it wouldn't make money, or that it has a shelf life, which, if you look at it, but I think that shelf life might be a couple of 100 years, though. That's the thing. Yeah. I don't think it's short term. It's like slavery, only, it had a shelf life, but it was a very, very long shelf life, and it was pretty awful,
Yeah, and also things
grim.
are just changing. The environment is changing so quickly. I mean, the environment for sort of ideas and things happening, that it's changing so quickly now that what is right needs to keep pace with what's possible. I
think, sadly, a lot of the times what's right doesn't make as much money. But then that's again what we were talking about, measuring success. Like, if you're only going to measure it in cost terms, then... Because then it's probably somebody who's bloody making money out of in America, certainly, they're all private prisons and private...
Oh, yeah, well, that's why there's so many people in prison. That's why there's so many people in prison, because people are making money out of it.
It's just
anyway, sorry, I'll let you continue your thought.
I was talking about the fact that it's actually, I do believe it's international law. People have a right to turn up at your border and go, hello, I am seeking asylum. and you can't turn them away. You have to accept them, which is why the UK is so big on people not, why it's easy for us to not have loads of refugees in many ways, which we don't have loads of refugees compared to other countries, because you've got to get across water to get here. So it's like,
so immigration does feel like a different conversation in this country just because we're an island.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when you're talking about it, you're kind of internalising Europe a bit more than I am, which is obviously a completely different situation.
So a lot of these people now that are turning up at the American border and were being ripped from their families are from Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, places where life's dangerous, and you have a right to move, to try and find a better life, and to argue that, and then you get the sort of argument, the counter argument of it's not my fault, or why don't they make it better where they are, blah blah blah, all these kind of, but I just think it's obviously as a person, I think it would be wrong for me to be against any sort of migration of people, because if it weren't for the migration of people, because both my parents migrated to a third country, they met in Germany because they had both migrated to do something. My mother to get better at speaking German because she's a German teacher, my father because that's a long story. But, there they were. And so, for me to sort of be anti-immigration would be a bit hypocritical. But there are these sides of it, which is part of the anti-EU argument, with the sort of free movement of people plays into the capitalist hands and brings down the wages and increases competition and does all these sorts of things. But
isn't the EU trying to also resolve those problems as it goes, and has actually the ability to say, here's the working wage, here's the living wage, here's the this and that? It frees up the resources to be able to improve those things, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so
in more places.
Yeah.
So, suddenly, a country that might never have considered those things has to, because it becomes European policy. You and I know agree on the if the EU's not working properly, you don't break it, you fix it. It's like
you use your voice and try and improve it.
You try and make it better. You don't just go, well, that experiment didn't work.
Exactly.
Because I think there's lots of things about it that really do work. But yes,
you can build on.
You can build on, make it better. Iterate, people, iterate.
It's like have some imagination, and you might, get past this sort of blinkered view of sort of oversimplified view that the Daily Mail is feeding you.
So, how do we move away from the thing that you were saying, which is it's all very okay if you're a white person migrating? Why are we so down on... How come we're so racist, and how come racism is conflated so much with immigration?
Yeah, and and I also want to shout out, I've listened to a couple of podcasts. I guess immigration is very much the topic this week, but this Akala's, I think you linked it to me, Akala's interview with James O'Brien. I will link to the episode. Like, you've got to listen to it, because this is a smart, articulate person that's he's got a lot to say. But some of the stuff that I took away from that was he was talking about the people that emigrated from the people, his family, his sort of grandparents that emigrated, and a lot of those families were upwardly mobile people. They were smart people that had the resources to move to another country because they thought, there's opportunities here that I might not have in my own country. And they had British passports. I mean, I honestly, I do not know enough about it to talk. I'm just going to say, hopefully this sounds interesting enough that you go and listen to Akala talking about it, because it's pretty fascinating. It's just in very recent history, everyone has been very racist, and we're nowhere near kind of recovering from that yet. So, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. Yeah. But I think also there is something to be said for sort of language barriers as well. Yeah. Which is a different thing, I think. It is a bit frustrating to, I suppose, for a state to try and deal with people that they can't communicate with. But in this country, where you can get everything in every single language, we're very accommodating. But I think probably it is tempting not to learn the language if you're kind of being looked after either way. And I saw that in Berlin as well. Like, you can just live there speaking English, but I didn't really like that. I kind of feel like I should be making an effort, but lots of people didn't. Lots of English people didn't. And when you sort of see, sort of immigration and lots of sort of communities of people that speak a certain language, and there's not really any incentive to sort of integrate, and you have that language barrier, I think that sort of creates a lot of tension.
Yeah, well, yes. We talked about this, so it's that I think it creates tension from the person who doesn't understand, who's going, what are they saying? And then there's that frustration of coming, that whole coming to our country, don't speak our language type thing. Which is understandable, it's kind of rude, to not, but it takes time to learn a language, and you can't learn a language if people aren't going to talk to you. A lot of the jobs that immigrants get as their first jobs are jobs where they don't have to talk to anybody, so they end up cleaning people's houses or doing manual labour, and so nobody's actually talking to them apart from perhaps like the other Bulgarian or the other Romanian or the other German or whoever got them in, brought them over. I will I don't know, this might my last house moving experience was horribly frustrating, because I got 3 guys that it's like moving someone's stuff into a van is not unskilled labour. That doesn't, it requires a lot of communication. There's a lot of moving companies that are sort of hiring people that don't really speak good enough English. And then I had this problem with these people that they were, I swear to God, they were hiding behind the language barrier to be just super lazy about everything. I was kind of shocked with, and that's I'm not being racist, but honestly, it was absolutely shocking how much they fucked about and how many cigarettes they were smoking and sort of stopping and waiting around. And then I'd try and say what I needed to happen, and it was and it's I don't know. This probably might not be podcast worthy, but that was a very frustrating experience for me. But I'm not blaming it on immigration, I suppose, as much as I'm blaming it on the company, not adequately training their staff, or just having I don't know. I need to probably pay more money to get some. You're going to get more expensive movers, Michael. I did some research.
These weren't super cheap, to be honest. No. They weren't mega. Although when I moved from Germany to England and I got just a kind of geezer, it just happened. It was well, they were kind of late, but then it was just no fuss, just done. A smart person doing the moving is that's what I want. How do you Google that? I don't know.
Well, I always find packing a van requires a certain amount of mathematical skill to get everything in.
Yeah.
It's
not just physical strength.
No, it's
you got to know what you're doing. You got to be able to figure stuff out.
Yeah, you got to plan
and
out
logistics. Yeah.
Well, you've got to plan out the order in which you're going to put things in, get them out, make sure they're all going to fit. Yeah. But it's not straightforward. Filling a van and emptying it, unless you've got a really big van and not many things, in which case it's easy.
But then you got to make sure they don't slip around and break and
that's
all that
true.
stuff. So, it's not trivial, and I just don't like this idea that you can get people that don't speak English, and Sharon got a letter from the Home Secretary yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
To EU citizens.
Oh.
And it's basically, well, I'll just read it. We can sort of trim it down. But dear Sharon, as Home Secretary, I take immense pride that so many EU citizens like you have made your home here. Safeguarding the rights of EU citizens in the UK has always been our first priority, and the agreement we reached with the EU earlier this year did just that. The rights that you and your family currently have are protected, which includes access to healthcare, benefits and pensions. Away from the negotiations, my team in the Home Office have been working hard to develop the service that you'll use to get your settled status. This work will continue as we make sure that the system and processes are rigorously tested and meet every requirement ahead of the launch. Today, I am able to announce in more detail this is what the system will look like, and that's a link to a Gov gov.uk page. Doesn't seem to be done yet. But most importantly, the application process is designed to be simple. Most people will only need to complete 3 sections to prove their identity, show that they live here, and declare that they have no serious criminal convictions. We will also check employment and benefits records we already hold in government, which for many people will mean that their proof of living here is automatic. We hope that, therefore, most people will not need to do anything beyond typing in personal details. What's more, settled status will cost less than the fee for a British passport, £65 and £32.50 for children under 16. For those who already have valid permanent residence or indefinite leave to remain documentation, they will be able to exchange it for free. There will be support for the vulnerable and those without access to a computer. I should stress that you do not need to do anything just yet. The scheme will open later this year. Deadline for applications is 30th of June 2021. In the meantime, please do share this message with friends and family. Hope that you agree with me that this is an important step towards the commitment we made to you and your family so that you can continue your lives here. Yours sincerely, Sajid Javid, Home Secretary. What do you think of that?
Well, you've got to do something if the current legislation or current reason to be here or, legislation under which you're here is changing. So is the settled status a new type of status?
Yeah.
So basic
eligibility, you need to be an EU citizen or family member of an EU citizen. You need to have been living in the UK continuously for 5 years and have started living in the UK by 31st of December 2020. If you've lived in the UK for less than 5 years, you'll generally be eligible for pre-settled status instead. I think what's interesting about this to me is, they're having to kind of create a whole new computer system.
Yeah, it's costing money.
To do this. And it's costing a lot of money,
yeah.
And it sounds like it's delayed, which is why they're here's a link to sort of what it will look like, because we haven't got it working yet. And hopefully it will connect to all our other systems. But yeah, I suppose the sort of outcome of that is maybe they'll do sort of make it relatively straightforward to register your status, but it's certainly costing more than the NHS money was costing probably at this point.
I think one thing the Government Digital Service has been working towards for sure is the idea of using modern connected. So, for example, you can upload an iPhone photo now for your passport, and if you've had a photo uploaded for your driver's license, it can automatically be used on your passport. All those kind of things. So they're getting stuff like that working. I imagine as well that this could be a precursor for people's applications to become citizens. What's happened to this Windrush generation has happened because of an absence of this sort of connected, here's my national insurance number. You check if I've lived here for the last 50 years, mate.
Yeah.
Why do I have to? Because I think that was part of the problem. They had this policy where you had to produce a piece of documentation for every single year that you'd lived here or something outrageous. So if it's a sort of seed system for something cleverer, so that, if you're, applying for British citizenship, the idea of government automatically getting all the data they already hold on you sounds infinitely sensible.
Here's proof of residence. You can give the Home Office permission to check HMRC data that may show how long you've lived in the UK. So they can check your HMRC stuff.
Yeah.
You may need to provide evidence to prove your residence, for example, P60s, bank statements, utility bills. You'll be able to submit scans of these documents through the online application form. You do not need to provide evidence of your entire residence in the UK, only for that period that proves you're eligible for settled or pre-settled status.
Well,
so it sounds like they're kind of they're doing a reasonably polished job of this, like from a technical perspective. So maybe it's something that needed to get done.
Well, certainly removing a degree of uncertainty for Sharon and people like Sharon. It's like, we're not, we intend to let you stay. Because did I tell you the story last? No, it was actually after we recorded the podcast. I went into town and to buy some shoes, And I was in a shoe shop and a lady was buying some shoes for her wedding. So we were, oh, congratulations. She said, yeah, we're only getting married because of Brexit, because my husband's an EU citizen and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So even though we've been together for years, we thought we should. So I don't want anyone to mention it ever again, but I'm getting some new shoes. It's more of a, so that was my first Brexit wedding that I experienced. And then the woman who owns the shop, she's a Spanish woman. She said her children keep having a go at her to get her British citizenship. She's like, I've owned this business for 30 years. What are they going to do? Chuck me out? Imagine all that with a very down-to-earth Spanish accent. She was like, they can try. But now her children are applying for their Spanish citizenship because they want EU and they don't want to have to queue when they go visit their grandparents. When I go to Croatia, I'm sort of 3 doors away from some very good family friends who have spent most of their working lives in Germany. Germany has a phrase which is Gastarbeiter, so, guest worker. So they've been guest workers in Germany for many, many, many years. They're pretty much German Croats, really. They do speak the language and all that jazz, but they're retiring back to Croatia, spend more and more time there. But anyway, we were talking about the fact that, Germany let in this 1 million refugees.
Yeah.
And, the way she phrased it was like, there's been problems since Merkel let in 1 million refugees.
Oh, God.
And I was like, well, what's the problem? Well, because they let so many in at the same time, all in one go, of course, not all the checks could be done quite as rigorously as maybe they would have. So they've had a few proven actual terrorist types slip through the net. But when I say a few, it's like, I think it's 29 out of 1 million.
Well, I mean, that is unacceptable.
I think it's as errors go. And this friend, she wasn't telling me this story she's a migrant worker, so she's not sitting there going, rah, 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 bloody migrants coming over here stealing our jobs. It was more like, it's been interesting in Germany, the sort of the political conversation around the fact that of these, loads of people came in one go. And then there have been problems because there are cultural problems. Germany kind of owns its history in many ways. And so errs always on the side of the progressiveness, because...
I think they're ultimately going to benefit from this. I think they're ultimately going to have I think it's going to pay dividends.
But they've also got towns in particularly what was formerly East Germany where there's just not enough young people, so there aren't enough care workers, because one of my Croatian cousins got a job in one of these towns where there aren't enough young people doing jobs that you need younger people to do because everyone's buggered off to what was West Germany or wherever. So migration does have a negative massively.
It does, but when I think about it, it's sort of like you're going to get lots of people. If you get lots of people coming in, you're going to get people that have the wherewithal to kind of move countries, or even if they're refugees, they're the ones that managed to had the intelligence to escape, had the connections, had the nous to kind of get out of there.
Yeah.
Right. So you're already that's a pretty good selection.
Yeah.
And then, you're always going to get a few idiots, but I really think the kind of benefits, this country is built on. Amazing things come from this place because there are so many things coming together.
But I don't know the answer for Britain, but if you look at America, everybody's a immigrant.
Yeah,
and not thousands of generations, a couple 100 years. And again, it's all those people who are hungry, looking for a better life, doing that thing, getting the money together and going to America to try and, live the American dream and become a gazillionaire, opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, how can you shut the door behind you? Why? Who do you think you are?
It was okay up until now. Up until now, everyone's allowed to come through.
Yeah, nobody else.
Also, the people that were here before, they don't matter either. I mean, I think, the cost of maybe a few people being on welfare or using the health system, compared to the sort of economic benefits of all of the people coming in that are probably not, have got a bit of imagination. I think it's got to be a net benefit.
Well, I don't. Yeah, one would imagine so.
How do we measure this? Are there measurements of this? How can we prove this?
Well,
I don't know.
I think in the UK they had that "If We All Go Home" campaign, post the referendum, and then there have been calculations of, yes, there is a cost. People come here and shit happens to them. We need to look after them, but also there are definitely studies that I've seen go around. But a lot of these things are, I think, a bit tricky to prove.
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to quantify this sort of thing, but I mean, I don't know, just intuitively,
look at the teams we've worked on. Look at Canonical. It's like
anything good any company I've ever worked for that's doing anything remotely interesting.
It's got
flipping
mishmash.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's people from everywhere and that live well, I don't know. I'm not sure about the whole kind of remote working thing, but so, you put all these people in a room and it's like
It's like we had the Canonical design team, I think, had 2-3 people that one would describe as British, and I don't count myself in that gang. We were like a proper mishmash of the world. And I remember being really frustrated sort of hiring visual designers and finding that, finding really good Brazilian designers, not being able to hire them because they actually need a work permit. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing in London without a work permit? It's like, why am I even interviewing you? God, because it's like, I can't sponsor a work visa, but they're...
And I've said it before, it's just more immigration policies being more stringent just means more admin for business, for me, if I want to hire someone that does something for,
Yeah, or having to compromise and hiring people who aren't as good. Because instead of picking from the best in the world, you're picking from... Which was one of the reasons why Canonical had their remote working policy, which is that whole, we're going to find the best person for the job, doesn't matter where they are, and they can work from home. But we had this problem with the design team where really it's very hard to work remotely.
But also I think it's hard for... I think you can't just divorce someone... this is a different conversation. But I don't think you can say a person exists as a brilliant person in isolation. It has to be about the communication and the sort of team as well. And if that's really kind of fragmented, then I think the net, there's a net.
See previous debate conversations about genius, I think, is the, and talent. It is that. It's that. The genius only comes through you when you're in this team. It's like, because we provoke it, we create it. Yeah. I can imagine, though, if your life is very hard and you feel like your country is helping other people and not helping you, I imagine that you'd be pretty pissed off.
So this is where the problems come. Yeah. Like people that feel like that they were here first, and why are other people seeming to get better treatment than they are? And why is that? What is that? Is that just a sense of entitlement that we can dismiss, or is it something that we have to desperately fix? Or what is it? What is it that people need that they're not getting? Because in the riots, for example, the London riots, it was quite revealing in terms of a lot of people kind of stealing big tellies and stuff. That was the kind of aspiration. It seemed to sort of reveal a sort of okay, well, do people just want a bigger telly, and then that's fine. What do you feel like you're not getting? Because obviously you're exposed to kind of fabulous wealth, and you're the media exposes you to people that you can only compare yourself to, that you never have any hope of kind of reaching that level of wealth. But that's certainly not something that's being given to immigrants.
No, but I think I think it's somebody's fault I don't have that big telly, and it's not my fault. So it must be your fault because you don't look like me and you're here. I don't know how it works. I found those riots amazing because we weren't in the country, and I was like, huh? What is going on? What has happened? But then, you don't need to travel far outside, because you see, I in many ways live in this little bubble in Brighton. But Brighton there is massive inequality, and I mean that going back to that Hugh Fernley how do you say his name? Hugh Fernley Whittlestore, there, that one. His TV show where he went to Newcastle and that woman went, "You're in the wrong place, part of town, come here." And she drove in, she's literally like, from this ward, from this council ward to this council ward, the average life expectancy falls by 12 years in the same city. So never mind travelling north and south, just travel to the other bit of your town where people's lives are not like yours. And it's like, that 12 years is massive. So if you translate 12 years into, just a life of not being able to afford good food, not be able to make your life better, then, that's a lot of being really angry.
Yeah, we need the luxury communism.
We do. We need the luxury communism.
I think like automation, like make everything easily with automation and then just have luxury communism.
Yeah. But I don't know if those people's life expectancy would go up.
Trouble is, like, when you haven't got that much money, drug addiction is quite, drinking, drugs are going to be the only way to sort of like feel a bit better about your situation. And that for me is like that kind of breaks my heart a bit, that to see people, they spending everything they have just for sort of a chemical dependency. But I mean, and I don't just limit that to like heroin addicts on the council estate. Just anyone that's sort of like having to sort of drink just to get through their existence. Like, even if it's just like every couple of nights, that's kind of heartbreaking to me as a kind of post-alcohol drinker. I don't know. It leads to anger. It leads to hangovers. It leads to... makes it hard to... Well, it just makes it hard to get out of a rut, I think. The problem, I think, like, a lot of people are stuck in a rut. They see other people being helped, and probably if you're a fresh immigrant, you're probably not going to be sort of settled into a sort of like drug dependent existence. And if you are, I think it's just like, it's the only thing you've got, but it's also like a massive sort of limiting factor in your ability to actually improve your situation. But I mean, and maybe it is the only thing that's possible, but I don't know, like I think there's something to...
I think there's also... I think the thing that helps everybody is not having people living in real poverty. It lifts... I firmly believe, and I can't point at a thing, that if, the higher you lift the lowest line of existence, so having living wages, having minimum wage, having... The higher you can get that line so that the poorest person isn't that poor anymore, or is, it's like... Yeah. Then the better it is for everybody. Like, can we pay for therapy for everyone? Well, yeah, I mean...
instead of the NHS, like 30 years down the line when everyone's livers are failing.
Well, that idea that it's all connected is... I keep getting all these stories from Lydia as well, goes on these courses and finds out more things about how children get damaged. And she was telling me this very inspiring story, and I don't know the woman's name, of this woman who Lydia said she was just listening. She does everything. She's everything. It's like, she's amazing. But she was this headmistress at a school in a deprived part of Nottingham, which was a massively failing school with kids chucking things, regularly, very young children on the roof of the school going, "Blah." It's like a total disaster. So she came in, sat the staff down and went, "I've got a plan. This is my plan. If you're with me, stay. If you're not with me, you're very welcome to go, and I will help you find somewhere else to go." And she did this. A couple of them went, and then one weekend she and a bunch of other staff dug a massive hole in the middle of the sports field, covered it in a marquee, police cars, fire engines parked up, and when all the kids turned up to school on Monday, they were like, "What's going on?" And she had she turned school, because basically their kids were failing at maths and English, so all they were doing is giving the kids more maths lessons and more exercises and more things and more. She was like, that is not working, let's not do that anymore. Made this thing, and then for the week the whole school were forensic investigators trying to work out where this hole had come from, and they had access to all this stuff, and the attendance for that week was 99%. Because everyone was really engaged, really interested. And by getting engagement and getting people going, she then started breakfast clubs that the parents could attend with the children. So they all got breakfast and they got to talk to each other. And then from these breakfast clubs, community groups formed. So people would help other people write their CVs, help them it was like a magical story of community engagement. But literally to the point where the local co-op and the Sainsbury's, if they needed somebody to get a job, would phone the school and go, have you got any parents who need some hours? Do you know what I mean? It was like, it became kind of everybody engaged in everything getting better for everyone. And, that, my friends, is what socialism is. It's not commies, I don't know, Trotskyist, whatever the hell it is. It's like
not being told what to do. It's not being given an opportunity to be creative and invent amazing things.
And it's like everybody helping everybody else out. And if you are really good, yes, you'll do better. But don't tread on other people on your way up. I think what's potentially changing in this country, it's got nothing to do with the referendum. So there was what has already started. I know there's these big political phrases like Northern Powerhouse, and there's all these, I don't know what they're all trying to do, but in digital technology land, a policy that government instituted a number of years ago was a way of making it easier for small to medium-sized businesses to compete for government contracts. So they don't all go to the likes of Capita and Cerillion, or however you say their name, the kind of people that go bust and don't care because they're massive behemoths and all that. Yeah. They came up with this framework for selling that's called G-Cloud, which the genius thing it did, I'll big up the people that came up with it, was simply opened up government business to a wider range of people, because they've worked out that for every £1 you spend with a small business versus a very big one, you're kind of saving £1 in government money. It's kind of, they've come up with these formulas. But the other side effect that this had is that a lot of government technology work, a lot of these projects like the settlement thing, are starting to engage companies across the UK. So there's some nice graphs or nice maps where you've got business used to be centralised in London and now it's going everywhere. Yeah. And a lot of these digital technology jobs are moving to places like Manchester, to Leeds, and so we're starting to see, I think, a new industry in those areas that's not just replacing coal mines with nothing.
That's fascinating, yeah. Because that's the whole thing with the internet. It's decentralised. You don't have to be. There's no reason you can't find a good team in another city.
And also, if I always use Doncaster as my example of a place that voted to leave the EU, because my mum keeps going. She's like, I was campaigning in Brighton and I should have been going to Doncaster. It's like, so we were talking about what we could do. It's like, go open a digital academy, one of those things that, people, and I don't mean that in the school academy sense, competing with state schools. I mean a place where locals can learn how to, make stuff for the internet and then do it from Doncaster. It's like, because it's the world of work is changing, the skills you need are changing, and people need to be given opportunities.
We've talked about money as freedom tokens. That's something you said.
Yeah.
And how really money it's less about having money, it's more about having freedom. So that must mean that when people are angry at immigrants, they are envious of the fact that they have less freedom than these people that seem to be able to. I mean, even just the fact that they're free to move between countries probably feels like they already have more freedom than you do if you just can't afford to do that and you can't think about it. So it sort of makes sense that you'd be angry about that. But it's like also what are the people that are angry about immigration not free to do that they would like to be free to do? We need to do a survey, don't we?
I don't know. My first flippant response was buy a bigger telly.
Buy a higher quality of grass.
I suppose they feel trapped. Maybe it's not that they... Maybe it's a feeling of trapped. So, which is not necessarily, I'm not free to do a thing, but I can't think of, it's more...
That's the opposite of freedom, being trapped. And I kind of feel there's the middle class trap as well, where like you can't really set up something ambitious because you can't afford not to be working. You have to work to live, and then your kind of standard of living raises, and now you can't stop working without everything going downhill. Like this is another trap. So there's like poverty traps, there's the middle class trap, and it's only really the super wealthy that actually have the freedom to set up, Facebooks and stuff.
But yeah, maybe it's a perverse, because, to say that a refugee has freedom is a bit of a... Well, I know you're just using, it's just a... But
I'm saying from the perspective of, the angry person. Native.
The angry native, the angry white British native who is angry. I think feeling trapped... you can't change jobs, you can't move house, you can't... It possibly doesn't even stretch as far as holiday. It's like you can't change cars, you can't change for everything in your life is what you've got or what you haven't got. Yeah, I think feeling trapped is probably an interesting factor in all this.
And it's a fairly universal feeling, I'd say. But you sort of... It then kind of has to turn into a conversation about what are your actual dreams and what is in your imagination. What sort of imagination do you have about how things could be better? Or are you kind of taking that all from these kind of fictionalized, unreal, friends universes and things like that? Is that where you're getting your ideas? Yeah,
because if it is, then there lives disappointment. The most recent thing I watched was this Newcastle can lose weight, war on sugar thing. And it gave a very vivid example. This is what we were talking about in fact, after the podcast last week, the fact that everything's connected, and one of the reasons we haven't picked like one topic which we keep pushing or one campaign is the fact that everything kind of joins up with everything else. And so one of the experts they have on this show is a nudge psychologist dude who's interested in the food industry, and he was talking about how fast food and fast food advertising coming into the country has created a world where a lot of these families are not addicted, like the shops where you can buy food have disappeared, the skills involved with cooking food have disappeared, and they all, they live off ready food but they, so they have this whole, it's sort of a, everybody advertised fast food to me. I eat fast food. I've forgotten how to cook. I can't cook healthy food. I'm overweight. I feel ill. I can't. It's kind of a cycle you can't break out of.
Yeah, there's a lot of forces that are keeping you down, and probably immigrants is the least of it.
But you want to blame somebody.
Yeah, we have to stop. We can't have people blaming the people with the least power, and that's I always come back to. It's just what people are being encouraged to do. Just who can't fight back? Okay, it's their fault.
Yeah.
The worst moment I had in Berlin when I'd been there for like a couple of months, I thought I was sort of settling in a little bit. I had this moment in a supermarket where the guy sort of scanned my stuff, and it came in like 21 euros or whatever. And I tried to use my card, but for some reason the card had been cancelled. And then I hadn't got the call because I hadn't put the right SIM card in my phone. So I sort of missed the kind of fraud protection call. And then I didn't have the language to communicate. I was like, well, can I just like take one thing out? And because I only had 20 euros in cash. Well, I tried to communicate, can you just take one thing out and do it? And he was like, no, mouse, and just like yelled at me to get out, like with my stuff. And it was absolutely humiliating and it was absolutely horrible. And that was the moment where I was like, I hate it here. I just want to go. It's horrible. That's just a story about not being able to defend myself as someone who doesn't speak the language, even though I was doing my best to learn it. It's just like we should not be bullying these people. They're probably having a bad enough time here that they kind of want to get back home sooner or later, that it's probably naturally going to happen one way or another once things calm down.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's a good story. One of the things about this America children in cages thing is that I don't believe that you need to be a parent to empathise with how bad this is. Do you really need to have that trauma to understand how traumatic it is? If you can't imagine it as the parent, imagine it as the child, imagine it as the adult in the area listening to the children. You know, you drop off your own child at nursery, it screams, you feel bad for the rest of the day. You don't want to, and it loves it, it's going to stop crying within 30 seconds, 5 seconds of you leaving. Yeah. It's like, it's going to have a great time and you still spend the, it's...
That's something the first therapist I ever spoke to actually said to me. I sort of said about my mother dying when I was 5, and he said, I mean, you just look at the reaction of a child being left alone at nursery for the day. Yeah. No wonder it takes you a lifetime to come to terms with it.
I mean, it's I just look at I went to London this week twice. One time I was home in time for bedtime, one time I wasn't. The next morning, my child turned around and goes, Mummy, you don't need to go to London anymore. It's like, yes, I do. Though she did volunteer. She said, are you going to the zoo? Because that's what happened last time she went to London. If you need somebody to come with you, Granny and I can come with you. I was like, okay, thank you for volunteering. But yeah, it's just like, you don't need to be there at that border. You don't need to have your country fall apart to have the bomb. Just pause.
Here is not even Donald Trump can justify what has been happening at the borders, and I think it's the first time he's ever actually had to renege on something he said and like sign an executive order that he said wouldn't be possible to do. I think it's the first time he's actually had to admit that it's he's
gone too far.
Something bad has been happening, and this is the result of having these sorts of immigration policies. It turns into too much administration to deal with, and then stuff slips through the cracks and you ruin people's lives and you create angry people, you create heartbroken people, and you just end up just offsetting a short-term placation of the populace for just massive problems in the future.
Yeah.
And the fact that we should be looking at this and going, this is what the result of what you want is. Can you handle that? Or maybe can we go back to that thing that you said you wanted and think of an alternative?
Yeah, and I think what's terrifying really at the moment is that the need for people to migrate is going to go up, not down. Climate change is going to have a bigger effect on migration than failing economies and war, and it's going to be like there's an area of Pakistan, I think, where it's been consistently over 50 degrees centigrade. People could not leave their houses. It's too hot for human habitation. And apparently Pakistan is going to be one of those countries that's most affected by climate change. Right. And, those people are going to have to go somewhere. Crops will fail, hunger. It is a big deal. We cannot just stop people moving, because, they're going to move.
We need one world. We need the Star Trek vision of the future where there are no borders and everyone can sort of go where they want. And maybe before long we'll have little kind of in-ear language translators anyway, so that won't be a problem. And we can solve this, but regressive thinking is not the answer to any of this.
Yeah, it cannot be solved one country at a time.
Thanks for listening to that podcast. You can find us at grandpodcast.com. There is a big orange button at the top left of that website that says subscribe on it, and that is going to help you listen to that in a nicer way in Apple Podcasts, or if you're not on iTunes, it actually turns into a different button depending on what kind of computer you're looking at it on. So if you're wondering how to listen to the podcast without having to do it through Facebook or through YouTube or something, then click on that subscribe button and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com, because I've done all the music on this, didn't I? And all the editing and all that kind of thing. Please give us some reviews on your podcast app of choice, or YouTube. I mean, YouTube comments are good, but that's a different thing. But certainly some likes on YouTube. So just give us some likes and some subscribes and some thises and that's, and just show some support. Yeah, you just spread the word.
Yes. Spread the word. Spread the word.
Spread the word like a flying bird.
And
all right. See you next week, hopefully.
Bye. 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 Bye.